As the road runs close by, this man was obliged to come close to us. We called to him when he was near, saying, "Master, where are you going so fast? Are you deserting the Musungu? For we know you belong to him, since you bought from us yesterday 2 doti worth of meat." "Yes," said he, "I am running away. I want to get to Simbamwenni. If you will take me there, I will give you a doti." We said to him then, "Come into our house and we'll talk it over quietly." When he was in our house, in an inner room, we locked him up, and went out again to the watch, but leaving word with the women to look out for him. We knew that if you wanted him you would send askari (soldiers) after him. We had but lit our pipes when we saw 2 men armed with short guns, and having no loads, coming along the road, looking now and then on the ground as if they were looking at footmarks. We knew them to be the men we were expecting, so we hailed them and said, "Masters, what are you looking for?" They said, "We are looking for a man who has deserted our master. Here are his footsteps. If you have been long in your hut you must have seen him. Can you tell us where he is?" We said, "Yes, he is in our house. If you'll come with us we will give him up to you, but your master must give us something for catching him." As Kigondo had promised to deliver Kingaru up, there remained nothing further to do for Uledi and Sarmian but to take charge of their prisoner, and bring him and his captors to my camp on the western bank of the Makata. Kingaru received 2 dozen lashes and was chained; his captor a doti, besides 5 kete of red coral beads for his wife. That downpour of rain which visited us the day we crossed the Makata proved the last of the Masika season. As the first rainfall which we had experienced occurred on the 23rd March, and the last on the 30th April, its duration was 39 days. The seers of Bagamoyo had delivered their vaticinations concerning this same Masika with solemnity. For 40 days, said they, rain would fall incessantly, whereas we had but experienced 18 days' rain. Nevertheless, we were glad that it was over, for we were tired of stopping day after day to dry the bales and grease the tools and ironware, and of seeing all things of cloth and leather rot visibly before our eyes. The 1st of May found us struggling through the mire and water of the Makata with a caravan bodily sick from the exertion and fatigue of crossing so many rivers and wading through marshes. Shaw was still suffering from his first mukunguru. Zaidi, a soldier, was critically ill with the smallpox. The Kichuma Chuma, little irons, had hold of Bombay across the chest, rendering him the most useless of the unserviceables. Mabruk Salim, a youth of lusty frame, following the example of Bombay, laid himself down on the marshy ground, professing his total inability to breast the Makata swamp. Abdul Kader, the Hindi tailor and adventurer, the weakliest of mortal bodies, was ever ailing for lack of force, as he expressed it in French, i.e. strength; ever indisposed to work, shiftless, mock-sick, but ever hungry. "O God!" was the cry of my tired soul, "were all the men of my expedition like this man, I should be compelled to return." Solomon was wise, perhaps from inspiration, perhaps from observation. I was becoming wise by experience, and I was compelled to observe that when mud and wet sapped the physical energy of the lazily inclined, a dog whip became their backs, restoring them to a sound, sometimes to an extravagant activity. For 30 miles from our camp was the Makata plain an extensive swamp. The water was on an average 1 foot in depth; in some places we plunged into holes 3, 4, or even 5 feet deep. Plash, splash, plash, splash, were the only sounds we heard from the commencement of the march until we found the bomas occupying the only dry spots along the line of march. This kind of work continued for 2 days, until we came in sight of the Rudewa River, another powerful stream with banks brimful of rushing rain water. Crossing a branch of the Rudewa, and emerging from the dank, reedy grass crowding the western bank, the view consisted of an immense sheet of water, topped by clumps of grass, tufts, and foliage of thinly scattered trees, bounded 10 or 12 miles off by the eastern front of the Usagara mountain range. The acme of discomfort and vexation was realized on the 5-mile march from the Rudewa branch. As myself and the Wangwana appeared with the loaded donkeys, the pagazis were observed huddled on a mound. When asked if the mound was the camp, they replied, "No." "Why then do you stop here?" "Ugh, water plenty." One drew a line across his loins to indicate the depth of water before us, another drew a line across his chest, another across his throat, another held his hand over his head, by which he meant that we should have to swim. Swim 5 miles through a reedy marsh! It was impossible. It was also impossible that such varied accounts could all be correct. Without hesitation, therefore, I ordered the Wangwana to proceed with the animals. After 3 hours of splashing through 4 feet of water we reached dry land and had traversed the swamp of Makata. But not without the swamp with its horrors having left a durable impression upon our minds. No one was disposed to forget its fatigues, nor the nausea of travel which it almost engendered. Subsequently we had to remember its passage still more vividly, and to regret that we had undertaken the journey during the Masika season, when the animals died from this date by 2s and 3s almost every day until but 5 sickly, worn-out beasts remained; when the Wangwana, soldiers, and pagazis sickened of diseases innumerable; when I myself was finally compelled to lie abed with an attack of acute dysentery, which brought me to the verge of the grave. I suffered more, perhaps, than I might have done had I taken the proper medicine, but my over-confidence in that compound called Collis Brown's chlorodyne delayed the cure which ultimately resulted from a judicious use of Dover's powder. In no one single case of diarrhoea or acute dysentery had this chlorodyne, about which so much has been said and written, any effect of lessening the attack whatever, though I used 3 bottles. To the dysentery contracted during the transit of the Makata swamp only 2 fell victims, and those were a pagazi and my poor little dog, Omar, my companion from India. The only tree of any prominence in the Makata valley was the palmyra palm (Borassus flabelliformis), and this grew in some places in numbers sufficient to be called a grove. The fruit was not ripe while we passed, otherwise we might have enjoyed it as a novelty. The other vegetation consisted of the several species of thorn bush, and the graceful parachute-topped and evergreen mimosa. The 4th of May we were ascending a gentle slope towards the important village of Rehenneko, the first village near to which we encamped in Usagara. It lay at the foot of the mountain, and its plenitude and mountain air promised us comfort and health. It was a square, compact village, surrounded by a thick wall of mud, enclosing cone-topped huts, roofed with bamboo and holcus stalks, and contained a population of about 1,000 souls. It has several wealthy and populous neighbours, whose inhabitants are independent enough in their manner, but not unpleasantly so. The streams are of the purest water, fresh and pellucid as crystal, bubbling over round pebbles and clean gravel, with a music delightful to hear to the traveller in search of such a sweetly potable element. The bamboo grows to serviceable size in the neighbourhood of Rehenneko, strong enough for tent and banji poles, and in numbers sufficient to supply an army. The mountain slopes are densely wooded with trees that might supply very good timber for building purposes. We rested 4 days at this pleasant spot to recruit ourselves and to allow the sick and feeble time to recover a little before testing their ability in the ascent of the Usagara mountains. End of Chapter 6, Part 1.